My family called me a warehouse worker at dinner last night. As I sat there watching my sister brag about her marketing internship while my parents nodded proudly. Nobody bothered to ask what I actually did at Morrison Tech Industries. When my phone buzzed with a text from our CEO asking where I was for the board meeting, I realized something had to change. The family dinner where I was dismissed as just another blue-collar employee would be their last moment of ignorance. Before we dive into how I turned my family's condescension into the most satisfying revenge story you'll ever hear, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. If this family drama hits home for you, smash that like button and subscribe because this story gets absolutely wild. You'll want to stick around to see how corporate power dynamics can completely flip a family hierarchy upside down. Let me back up and explain how I ended up in this bizarre situation. My name is Serafina Walsh, and for the past 3 years, I had been deliberately keeping my real job title secret from my family. It started innocently enough when I got hired at Morrison Tech Industries straight out of college. I told my parents I worked there, but I never specified my role, and they just assumed I was doing entry-level warehouse work because that was the only department they could comprehend. Morrison Tech was a massive logistics and technology company that revolutionized supply chain management across North America. When I said I worked there, my father immediately pictured me pushing boxes around in a warehouse. And honestly, I did not correct him. Why? Because my family had always treated me like the academic disappointment. My sister Victoria had gotten her business degree from a prestigious university thanks to my parents paying her full tuition and living expenses. Meanwhile, I had worked 3 jobs to put myself through state school studying industrial engineering with a focus on systems optimization. Victoria landed her marketing internship through family connections, while I earned my position through a rigorous interview process that included presenting a supply chain efficiency proposal to the entire executive team. The family favoritism was blatant and painful. Every family gathering turned into a Victoria appreciation ceremony. My parents would beam with pride, talking about her networking events, her potential salary, her bright future in corporate America. When they mentioned me at all, it was with sympathetic headshakes and comments like, "Well, at least Serafina has steady work," or "Manual labor builds character." The condescension reached peak levels during holiday gatherings. My aunt would pat my shoulder and say things like, "Not everyone can be management materials, sweetie." My uncle would joke about me working with my hands as if it was somehow lesser than working with spreadsheets. Victoria would smile sweetly and change the subject whenever anyone asked about my job, clearly embarrassed by her blue-collar sister. What they did not know was that I had been promoted 4 times in 3 years. I started as a junior systems analyst, moved up to logistics coordinator, then became operations manager, and finally landed the role of director of strategic operations. At 26, I was the youngest director in company history, overseeing a team of 43 employees and managing supply chain operations worth hundreds of millions of dollars. My salary was double what Victoria would make at her internship turned entry-level job. I owned my apartment outright, drove a Tesla Model S, and had been building an impressive investment portfolio. But I kept living modestly around my family, never correcting their assumptions, partly out of stubbornness and partly because I was curious to see how far their contempt would go. The breaking point came at my cousin's wedding last month. During the reception, my extended family was making their usual rounds of career small talk. Victoria was holding court, describing her challenging internship duties like organizing filing systems and scheduling meetings. Everyone listened with rapt attention, asking thoughtful questions about her professional development. When the conversation turned to me, my father literally said, "Serafina just works in a warehouse, nothing too exciting to discuss there." The table nodded sympathetically, and someone changed the subject to Victoria's upcoming performance review. I excused myself to the bathroom and found myself staring in the mirror, questioning why I had allowed this charade to continue for so long. That night, I decided things needed to change, but I wanted to do it strategically. I was not going to just blurt out my job title and let them brush it off. I wanted them to truly understand the magnitude of their assumptions. That decision led to last night's dinner, which was supposed to be a celebration of Victoria's 6-month internship anniversary. My parents had invited the whole family to commemorate this milestone in her career. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. considering I had just closed a partnership deal worth $50 million that morning. As we sat around the dinner table, Victoria launched into a detailed account of her latest project reorganizing the company breakroom supplies. My parents listened as if she was describing a merger acquisition. My grandmother asked follow-up questions about inventory management techniques, and Victoria explained how she had created a spreadsheet to track coffee pod usage. Then my father turned to me with that patronizing smile I had grown to hate. "How about you, Sarah? Anything interesting happening at the warehouse?" "The usual," I replied, cutting into my steak. "Moving things around, managing logistics." "Well," my mother said with forced cheerfulness, "steady work is nothing to be ashamed of. Not everyone needs to climb the corporate ladder." Victoria jumped in with her signature fake concern. "You know, Sarah, if you ever want help with your resume, I have learned so much about professional presentation during my internship. I could help you apply for something more substantial." The word substantial hung in the air like a challenge. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed with a text message. The screen lit up with Morrison Tech CEO and a preview that read, "Board meeting in 20 minutes. Where are you?" I glanced at the message, then at my family, who were all staring at my phone with curiosity. This was the moment I had been unconsciously waiting for. "Sorry," I said, standing up from the table. "I need to take this call." I walked into the kitchen, but instead of taking a private call, I decided to answer the text right there at the dinner table. My family was pretending not to watch, but I could feel their eyes on me as I typed back. "Family dinner running late. Can we push the quarterly logistics review to tomorrow morning? The Morrison-Phillips integration timeline is more pressing anyway." My phone immediately rang. The caller ID clearly displayed James Morrison, CEO, Morrison Tech Industries, for everyone at the table to see. I answered on speakerphone, knowing exactly what I was doing. "Serafina, thank God you picked up," came the unmistakable voice of James Morrison, a man whose interviews were regularly featured in Forbes and Business Weekly. "I know it's Sunday evening, but the Phillips Industries merger documents just came through, and I need your strategic assessment before tomorrow's board presentation. This deal could not happen without your logistics framework." The silence at the dinner table was deafening. Every fork had stopped moving. Victoria's mouth was actually hanging open. "I understand the urgency, James," I replied, using his first name as I always did. "The integration model I designed should handle the transition seamlessly, but I want to review the warehouse consolidation numbers one more time. Can you send me the Philadelphia facility data?" "Already in your email. Honestly, Serafina, I do not know how we managed strategic operations before you came aboard. The board is specifically asking for your presentation on the cost reduction implementations. They are expecting those numbers you projected. What was it, 30% efficiency improvement? 32%, actually. The automated sorting systems exceeded our initial projections." I was fully aware that my family was hanging on every word, trying to process what they were hearing. "Brilliant! Listen, I hate to cut into your personal time, but could you join us virtually for tomorrow's board meeting? The investors want to hear directly from you about the expansion timeline." "Of course." "Should I prepare the quarterly performance slides or focus specifically on the Phillips integration?" "Both if possible. Your supply chain optimization reports have been the highlight of every board meeting this year. The investors specifically requested your analysis on the West Coast expansion." After ending the call, I turned back to face my family, who were all staring at me like I had just sprouted wings. The confusion on their faces was almost comical. "Who was that?" my father asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "My boss," I said, simply sitting back down at the table. "Your boss," Victoria repeated. "Warehouse supervisors do not usually get calls from—" "Did he say CEO?" "He did say CEO," my grandmother confirmed, looking bewildered. I took a sip of my wine, enjoying the moment more than I probably should have. "That was James Morrison. He owns Morrison Tech Industries." The revelation hit the table like a bomb. My mother's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. My father's fork clattered against his plate. Victoria looked like someone had just told her the earth was flat. "But you said you worked in a warehouse," my mother stammered. "No," I corrected gently. You all said I worked in a warehouse. I just never corrected you. What do you actually do? Victoria asked, and for the first time in years, there was no condescension in her voice. I am the Director of Strategic Operations. I oversee supply chain management, logistics coordination, and operational efficiency for one of the largest tech logistics companies in North America. I manage a team of 43 employees across 6 states, and I just closed a $50 million partnership deal this morning. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. I could practically hear their mental calculations as they tried to reconcile the daughter and sister they had been dismissing with this new information. How much do you make? The question came from my uncle, who had always been the most direct about money matters. I considered deflecting, but this was my moment of complete honesty. My base salary is $180,000 plus performance bonuses that typically add another $60,000 to $80,000 annually. Victoria nearly choked on her wine. Her internship paid $15 an hour. When did this happen? My father asked, still looking shell-shocked. I have been with Morrison Tech for 3 years. I started as a junior analyst right after graduation and worked my way up. I have been a director for 8 months now. Why did not you tell us? My mother's voice was small, confused. This was the question I had been preparing for, though I had not expected it to feel so loaded when it actually came. I set down my wine glass and looked around the table at each of them. Because you never asked, I said simply. For 3 years, every family gathering, every phone call, every conversation has been about Victoria's internship, Victoria's networking events, Victoria's potential career prospects. When anyone mentioned my job, it was with pity or dismissal. You all decided what I did based on your own assumptions, and it became clear that you were not actually interested in my success. That is not fair, Victoria protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Is not it? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my photos. This is from the company holiday party last December. I showed them a picture of me accepting an award for outstanding leadership in operations innovation standing next to James Morrison and the rest of the executive team. This is from the Morrison Tech Leadership Retreat in March. Another photo of me presenting to a room full of executives, my name clearly visible on a presentation slide titled Strategic Operations Driving Efficiency Through Innovation. And this, I said, scrolling to my most recent photo, is from last week's groundbreaking ceremony for our new distribution center in Phoenix. I designed the entire operational framework for that facility. Each photo was like another piece of evidence in a case they could not argue against. The woman in these pictures was confident professional, clearly respected by her colleagues. She was not the warehouse worker they had created in their minds. You let us think. My father started, then stopped. I let you think what you wanted to think, I finished. And what you wanted to think was that I was less successful than Victoria, less ambitious, less capable. It was easier for you to believe that than to actually ask questions or show genuine interest in my life. The weight of their assumptions was finally hitting them. I could see the realization dawning that they had been condescending to someone who was not only successful, but was likely more professionally accomplished than anyone else at the table. We are proud of you, my mother said weakly, but the words felt hollow after years of indifference. Are you? I asked. Because I am the same person I was an hour ago. The only thing that has changed is your perception. If James Morrison had not called, if you had not overheard that conversation, would you still be asking Victoria to help me with my resume? The question hung in the air unanswered but understood. We all knew the truth. The dinner ended awkwardly with my family struggling to process this new reality. Over the next few days, I watched as they went through what I can only describe as the 5 stages of grief over their shattered assumptions. First came denial. Victoria called me Tuesday morning suggesting that maybe I was exaggerating my role or that the CEO call was somehow staged. I mean, do warehouse workers really get promoted that quickly? She asked, still clinging to her old narrative. Then came anger. My father left a voicemail expressing his frustration that I had deceived them for so long. How were we supposed to know if you did not tell us? He demanded, conveniently forgetting that they had never asked. Bargaining followed shortly after. My mother started texting me articles about sibling relationships and family communication with messages like, maybe we can all try harder to stay connected, and family should always support each other. Depression hit when they realized the full scope of what they had missed. Victoria sent a long email detailing all the times she could have included me in her networking events, all the professional contacts she could have introduced me to, all the conversations they could have had about career strategy and business insights. But it was the final stage, acceptance. That led to the most interesting developments. My cousin Maria was the first family member to reach out with genuine curiosity rather than damage control. She called me Thursday evening, and instead of apologizing for the family's behavior, she asked if I wanted to grab coffee and actually talk about my work. I have been thinking about our conversation at dinner, she said as we sat in a downtown cafe near my office. I manage the supply chain for a mid-sized retail company, and some of the stuff you mentioned about optimization and efficiency, I could really use that expertise. This was the beginning of what I would later recognize as my first real alliance within the family. Maria and I had always gotten along, but we had never connected on a professional level because nobody thought I had anything professional to offer. Now, suddenly, I was someone worth consulting. What kind of challenges are you facing? I asked, genuinely interested in helping her. Inventory management is killing us. We are constantly overstocked on some items and completely out of others. Our distribution costs are through the roof, and I feel like I am just throwing solutions at the wall to see what sticks. I spent the next hour walking her through some basic supply chain analysis techniques, showing her how to identify bottlenecks, optimize reorder points, and implement demand forecasting. It felt good to share my expertise with someone who actually appreciated it. By the following week, Maria had implemented 3 of my suggestions and seen immediate improvements in her department's efficiency. She started referring to me as her supply chain guru and mentioned my consulting to other people in her company. This caught the attention of my uncle Robert Maria's father, who owned a small manufacturing business that had been struggling with logistics issues for years. He approached me at Maria's birthday party the following Saturday, hat in hand. Serafina Maria tells me you have been helping her with some business strategy stuff. I wonder if you might take a look at some problems I have been having with my shipping costs. It was surreal hearing him ask for my professional advice after years of patronizing comments about my simple warehouse job. But I agreed to help partly out of family obligation and partly because I was curious to see if I could make a difference. Robert's manufacturing company made custom furniture, and their shipping and logistics were indeed a mess. They were using multiple carriers with no coordination, had no system for tracking inventory levels, and were literally hemorrhaging money on rush shipping costs because they could not predict demand. I spent a weekend analyzing their operations and created a comprehensive logistics plan that would reduce their shipping costs by approximately 40% while improving delivery times. The presentation I put together was the same quality I would deliver to Morrison Tech's board of directors. When I presented my findings to Robert and his business partner, their reactions were almost comical. Robert kept asking questions like, "How did you figure this out?" and "Where did you learn to do this kind of analysis?" As if the skills required to optimize a small furniture company's logistics were somehow different from optimizing a multi-million-dollar corporate supply chain. But the results spoke for themselves. Within a month of implementing my recommendations, Robert's business saw the exact cost savings I had projected. He was so impressed that he started telling other small business owners in his network about his genius niece who revolutionized his operations. This led to my next unexpected alliance. Robert's business partner David had a brother who owned a food distribution company. David mentioned my consulting work, and soon I was fielding a call from someone who had heard that I could work miracles with logistics problems. The food distribution consultation turned into a 3-month project that I worked on during evenings and weekends. It was challenging because food distribution has unique requirements around temperature control, shelf life management, and regulatory compliance that I had not dealt with extensively. But I approached it the same way I approached every professional challenge, with thorough research, strategic analysis, and systematic problem solving. The success of that project led to referrals to 2 more small businesses, and suddenly I had an informal consulting practice developing alongside my regular job at Morrison Tech. More importantly, I had a growing network of family members and family connections who now saw me as someone with valuable expertise rather than someone to be pitied. Victoria, meanwhile, was struggling with her own career progression. Her internship had ended, and despite all the family fanfare about her potential, she was having trouble finding a full-time position. The marketing field was competitive, and her entry-level experience was not setting her apart from other candidates. She finally swallowed her pride and asked if I could give her some career advice. We met for lunch on a Wednesday, and for the first time in our adult lives, we had a conversation where she was asking for my perspective rather than offering hers. "I do not understand why I am not getting callbacks," she said, showing me her resume. "I have good grades, relevant experience, and I interview well." Looking at her resume, I could see several issues immediately. Her experience descriptions were vague, she had not quantified any of her achievements, and she was not effectively highlighting the skills that would transfer to other roles. But more fundamentally, she was positioning herself as someone who had been handed opportunities rather than someone who had earned them. "Tell me about the most challenging project you worked on during your internship," I said. She described reorganizing the breakroom supplies, which had indeed involved some basic inventory management and cost analysis. But the way she talked about it made it sound like busy work rather than a legitimate business improvement initiative. "Okay, here is how you should be describing that project," I said, and I walked her through how to reframe her experience in terms of business impact, cost savings, and process improvement. I showed her how to quantify results, how to use action-oriented language, and how to connect her internship projects to larger business objectives. It was the first time I had ever been in the position of mentoring Victoria, and I found it surprisingly satisfying. Not because I was getting revenge for years of condescension, but because I was finally able to contribute something meaningful to our relationship. By this point, the family dynamic had shifted dramatically. Instead of being the disappointing daughter who worked with her hands, I had become the go-to person for business advice, career strategy, and professional problem-solving. Family members who had barely acknowledged my existence were now seeking my consultation on everything from investment decisions to job search strategies. But this shift created its own tensions. Victoria was clearly struggling with the role reversal, and my parents seemed unsure how to relate to me now that they realized they had been completely wrong about my capabilities. There was an underlying awkwardness in all our interactions, as if everyone was trying to figure out how to rewrite years of established relationship patterns. The situation became even more complicated when my success started attracting attention from beyond our immediate family circle. The betrayal came from the person I least expected, Maria. 3 months after our family dinner revelation, my informal consulting practice had grown beyond anything I had anticipated. Word of mouth from Robert's furniture business and the food distribution company had led to inquiries from a dozen other small businesses. I was working evenings and weekends helping entrepreneurs optimize their operations while maintaining my full-time responsibilities at Morrison Tech. Maria had been my biggest supporter throughout this process. She regularly referred potential clients to me, bragged about my expertise at family gatherings, and had even suggested we formalize our partnership into a legitimate consulting firm. "You could quit Morrison Tech and we could build something amazing together," she had said over dinner just 2 weeks earlier. I was seriously considering the proposition. The consulting work was fulfilling in ways my corporate job was not, and the financial potential was substantial. Several of my clients had offered to pay premium rates for ongoing strategic advice, and I was starting to see a path toward entrepreneurial independence that excited me more than climbing the corporate ladder. That excitement made the betrayal even more devastating. It started with a phone call from David, Robert's business partner, on a Tuesday morning. His voice was tense, concerned. "Serafina, I think there might be a problem with the logistics plan you created for us." My stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "We implemented everything exactly as you recommended, but our costs have actually increased by about 15% over the past month. The delivery times are worse than before, and we have had 3 major shipping errors that cost us significant customer relationships." This made no sense. I had spent weeks analyzing their operations, and my recommendations had been based on solid data and proven optimization principles. "Can you send me your current operational data I need to see what's happening?" When the data arrived, I was genuinely confused. The numbers showed that they had implemented my recommendations correctly, but somehow the results were completely different from what my analysis had predicted. Either I had made fundamental errors in my assessment, or something else was going on. I spent the entire evening reviewing my original analysis, checking my calculations, and trying to identify where I might have gone wrong. Everything looked correct. My supply chain models were sound, my cost projections were based on accurate data, and my efficiency recommendations followed standard industry practices. The next morning, I received similar calls from two other consulting clients. Both reported that my recommendations had not only failed to deliver promised results, but had actually made their operations worse. One small retail company claimed that my inventory management system had led to stockouts during their busiest sales period, costing them thousands in lost revenue. By Thursday, I had heard from 5 clients, all reporting similar problems. The consulting practice I had been so proud of was crumbling, and my professional reputation was in serious jeopardy. Worse, these were not just business failures. They were family relationships and family connections that I was damaging. I called an emergency meeting with Maria for Friday evening. She met me at the same cafe where we had first discussed her supply chain challenges, but her demeanor was completely different. Gone was the enthusiastic supporter who had been encouraging me to start a consulting firm. Instead, she seemed distant, almost cold. Maria, I need to understand what's happening with these consulting projects. Something is not adding up. She avoided eye contact, stirring her coffee nervously. Maybe you just overestimated your expertise. Corporate consulting and small business consulting are different animals. That's not it, I insisted. I have reviewed all my analyses multiple times. The recommendations were solid. There has to be another explanation. Like what? Like someone sabotaging the implementations. The words hung in the air between us. Maria's reaction told me everything I needed to know. She went completely still, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. "Why would you say that?" she asked, but her voice had changed. There was something defensive, almost guilty in her tone. "Because it's the only explanation that makes sense. The failure patterns are too consistent, too systematic. Someone with access to the implementation details would have had to deliberately modify the recommendations to create these results." Maria set down her cup and finally looked at me directly. What I saw in her eyes made my heart sink. It was not confusion or concern. It was resignation, like someone who had been caught in a lie they were tired of maintaining. "Maria, what did you do?" The confession came out in a rush, as if she had been holding it back for weeks. "Victoria approached me about 6 weeks ago. She was struggling to find a job and she was angry about how much attention you were getting from the family. She said you were making everyone look bad, that your success was highlighting everyone else's failures." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "What does this have to do with my consulting clients?" "She convinced me that you were getting too big for your britches, that the family was starting to treat you like some kind of business guru, when you really just got lucky with one corporate job. She said someone needed to humble you before you damaged your relationships with everyone." "So you sabotaged my client implementations." "Not sabotaged exactly. Modified. Victoria has business training and she convinced me that your recommendations needed to be adjusted for small business realities. She said corporate strategies do not translate directly to smaller operations." The full scope of the betrayal was becoming clear. "You gave Victoria access to my client files and let her modify my recommendations. She said she was helping make them more realistic. I thought she was looking out for your reputation, preventing you from giving advice that would not work in practice." "Maria, those recommendations were specifically designed for small business operations. I spent weeks customizing each analysis for the specific needs and constraints of each client. Victoria's modifications were not improvements. They were sabotage." The truth was even worse than I had imagined. Victoria had not just undermined my consulting work out of jealousy. She had convinced Maria to help her do it by framing it as protective intervention. She had manipulated our cousin into believing that destroying my professional credibility was somehow in my best interest. "How many clients I asked. "All of them," Maria whispered. "Victoria said it was important to be consistent." The betrayal was complete and systematic. every piece of consulting work I had done over the past 3 months had been deliberately sabotaged by my own sister with the help of the family member I had trusted most. Not only had they destroyed my emerging consulting practice, but they had also potentially damaged the businesses of people who had trusted my expertise. But the worst part was not the professional damage. It was the realization that my family's acceptance of my success had been superficial and fragile. The moment my achievements threatened Victoria's position as the family's designated success story, she had moved to eliminate the competition, and she had found a willing collaborator in Maria, who had apparently been harboring her own resentments about my sudden rise in family status. As I sat in that cafe, listening to Maria's tearful apologies and justifications, I realized that I had been naive to think that revealing my professional success would fundamentally change my family dynamics. Instead, it had simply shifted the battlefield. The weekend after Maria's confession was one of the darkest periods of my professional life. I spent Saturday and Sunday calling each of my sabotaged clients, explaining what had happened, and offering to personally oversee new implementations of my original recommendations at no charge. Most were understandably skeptical and angry, and 2 refused to work with me further regardless of the circumstances. But as I was preparing to salvage what I could of the consulting disasters, I received an unexpected phone call Monday morning that would change everything. "Ms. Walsh, this is Jennifer Martinez from Martinez Logistics Consulting. I understand you have been doing some independent supply chain work for small businesses in the area." I had never heard of Martinez Logistics Consulting, but the timing of the call made me suspicious. "How did you hear about my work?" "Actually, I have been tracking your consulting results for the past month. Several of the businesses you worked with are in my professional network, and I started noticing some concerning patterns in their operational changes." My heart sank. Word of the consulting failures was apparently spreading beyond my immediate client base. "What kind of patterns?" "Well, that is the interesting thing. The implementations I observed were completely contrary to standard supply chain optimization practices. But when I looked into your background and your work at Morrison Tech, I could not understand why someone with your expertise would make such fundamental errors." Jennifer's call was not about criticizing my work. It was about investigating it. As a professional logistics consultant with 15 years of experience, she had recognized that my failed recommendations were not consistent with my demonstrated capabilities. "I took the liberty of reaching out to James Morrison to ask about your professional competencies," she continued. "He spoke very highly of your strategic thinking and analytical skills. He also mentioned that you have been developing some innovative approaches to small business logistics optimization that caught the attention of several industry colleagues." This was news to me. I had no idea that James had been discussing my consulting work with other professionals in the field. Based on that conversation, I suspected that something external might have compromised your client implementations. So I did some investigating. Jennifer had approached this like a detective case, systematically analyzing the differences between my original recommendations and the actual implementations. She had identified patterns in the modifications that suggested deliberate sabotage by someone with basic business knowledge but limited understanding of supply chain dynamics. "Ms. Walsh, I believe your work was systematically altered by someone who wanted to ensure your failure. The modification patterns are too consistent and too strategically damaging to be accidental." "I know who did it," I said, and I told her about Victoria and Maria's confession. "That explains everything," Jennifer replied. "The modifications show exactly the kind of theoretical business knowledge someone might have from a marketing internship, but without the practical understanding of how supply chain systems actually function." But Jennifer had not called just to validate my suspicions. She had a proposition. "I have been looking for a partner to help expand my consulting practice into the small business market. Most logistics consultants focus on large corporations because that is where the big fees are, but I think there is significant opportunity in helping smaller businesses optimize their operations. Your approach to customizing corporate-level strategies for small business constraints is exactly what this market needs." She had spent the past week reviewing my original client analyses, the ones that had been sabotaged before implementation. Her assessment was that my recommendations represented some of the most innovative small business logistics thinking she had seen. I would like to propose a partnership. I bring 15 years of consulting experience and an established professional network. You bring fresh analytical approaches and a deep understanding of how to scale corporate strategies for smaller operations. Together, we could build something significant. But the partnership offer came with a condition: she wanted to use my sabotaged clients as case studies to demonstrate the effectiveness of proper implementation versus compromised implementation. With your permission, I would like to approach your former clients with an offer to implement your original recommendations at no charge with my firm, covering all costs as a professional development investment. If we can demonstrate the difference between your actual strategic thinking and the sabotaged versions, it would serve multiple purposes. It would restore your professional reputation, provide concrete case studies for our partnership, and give these businesses the operational improvements they deserve. The proposal was brilliant and risky. If the re-implementations succeeded, it would prove definitively that the failures had been due to sabotage rather than incompetence. If they failed, it would confirm that my original analyses had been flawed, and I would lose what remained of my professional credibility. I agreed to the partnership and the case study approach. Over the next month, Jennifer and I worked together to re-implement my original recommendations with 5 of the sabotaged clients. The results were even better than my initial projections had predicted. Robert's furniture business saw the 40% cost reduction I had originally promised, plus additional efficiency gains from some refinements Jennifer suggested. The food distribution company that had been struggling with my modified recommendations achieved the inventory optimization and delivery time improvements that had been obscured by Victoria's alterations. Most importantly, we documented everything meticulously. Jennifer insisted on creating detailed before and after analyses that showed the exact impact of the sabotage and the subsequent restoration. The documentation painted a clear picture. My original strategic thinking had been sound, and the failures had been entirely due to deliberate interference. But the real breakthrough came when Jennifer introduced me to her professional network. Through her connections, I met supply chain executives from 3 major corporations who were interested in my approaches to small business optimization. One conversation led to another, and within 6 weeks, I had consulting offers from 2 Fortune 500 companies that wanted help developing small business partnership strategies. The partnership with Jennifer was transforming my professional trajectory in ways I had not anticipated. Instead of choosing between my Morrison Tech career and independent consulting, I was developing expertise that made me valuable in both contexts. James Morrison had started asking me to consult on Morrison Tech's small business client strategies, and other corporations were approaching me for similar insights. But success was also creating new pressures within my family. Word of the partnership and the corporate consulting offers had reached my relatives, and the reactions were mixed. Some family members were genuinely excited about my expanding success. Others seemed threatened by how quickly I was outgrowing their expectations. Victoria, meanwhile, had remained silent since Maria's confession. She had not apologized, had not acknowledged her sabotage, and had not attempted to make amends with the clients she had harmed. Her silence felt ominous, like a storm building on the horizon. The final confrontation came at my grandmother's 80th birthday party 6 months after the dinner revelation that had started everything. The entire extended family was gathered, and for the first time in my adult life, people were asking me about my work with genuine interest and respect. My consulting partnership with Jennifer had grown into a thriving practice. We had successfully helped dozens of small businesses optimize their operations, and several major corporations were now contracting us for small business market development strategies. I had been featured in 3 industry publications as an emerging expert in scalable logistics solutions, and Jennifer and I were preparing to present our research at a national supply chain conference. But the professional success was only part of the transformation. The real change was in how I approached family relationships and personal boundaries. As the birthday celebration was winding down, Victoria finally approached me. She had been avoiding direct conversation all evening, but something had apparently pushed her to seek a confrontation. "I suppose you think you have won," she said, her voice carrying the same condescending tone I remembered from childhood. "Won what, Victoria? The family competition. Everyone thinks you are so brilliant now, so successful. You have completely rewritten the narrative about who is the accomplished sister." Her words revealed so much about how she had always viewed our relationship. For Victoria, family dynamics were not about mutual support or genuine connection. They were about competition ranking and maintaining hierarchical position. There was never a competition, I replied. You created that in your own mind. Did not I? You have been playing the long game this entire time. Haven't you? Hiding your real job, letting everyone underestimate you, then springing the big revelation for maximum dramatic impact. It was calculated. What was calculated was your sabotage of my consulting clients. You deliberately damaged my professional relationships and potentially harmed several small businesses because you could not handle the fact that I was successful. I was protecting the family from your arrogance, she shot back. You were getting too big for your britches, making everyone else look bad. Someone needed to remind you that one corporate job does not make you better than everyone else. And someone needed to remind you that sabotaging your sister's career is not protective. It is destructive and vindictive. The conversation had attracted the attention of nearby family members who were pretending not to listen while clearly following every word. This was the moment of truth that had been building for months. You want to talk about arrogance? I continued, my voice remaining calm but carrying an edge of steel. Let me tell you what I learned about our family dynamics over the past year. The arrogance was not mine. It was yours. You assumed that success and intelligence were finite resources that only one of us could possess. You assumed that my achievements somehow diminished yours, and when your assumptions were proven wrong, instead of celebrating your sister's success, you tried to destroy it. I did not try to destroy anything, Victoria protested, but her voice lacked conviction. You systematically sabotaged 6 months of my consulting work, potentially damaging the livelihoods of small business owners who trusted my expertise. You manipulated Maria into helping you by framing sabotage as protection. You damaged my professional reputation and nearly cost me a consulting partnership that has become one of the most fulfilling aspects of my career. By now, the entire family gathering had gone quiet. Everyone was listening to our conversation, and the weight of Victoria's actions was becoming clear to people who had not previously understood the full scope of what had happened. But here is what you did not understand, I continued. Your sabotage actually led to something better than what I had before. Working with Jennifer to rebuild those client relationships taught me more about consulting than I would have learned otherwise. Documenting the difference between my original recommendations and your modifications created case studies that have been invaluable for our business development. And most importantly, it showed me exactly who in this family I can trust and who I cannot. I turned to address the broader family gathering. For those of you who do not know the full story, Victoria deliberately sabotaged my consulting work because she felt threatened by my professional success. She convinced Maria to help her modify my client recommendations in ways that were designed to make me look incompetent and damage my professional reputation. The revelation hit the family like a shockwave. Several people turned to look at Victoria with expressions ranging from disappointment to disgust. Maria, who was standing near the back of the group, looked like she wanted to disappear entirely. Victoria, is this true? My father asked, his voice heavy with disbelief. Victoria's silence was answer enough. I said, this is a good time for me to clarify some things about family loyalty and support. Real family celebrates each other's successes. Real family asks questions about your life because they genuinely care about your experiences. Real family does not assume the worst about your capabilities and then refuse to correct their assumptions when presented with evidence. I looked around at the assembled relatives, making eye contact with each person who had contributed to years of condescension and dismissal. Real family does not sabotage your professional relationships because they feel threatened by your achievements. And real family definitely does not manipulate other family members into participating in destructive behavior while framing it as protective intervention. The silence in the room was profound. Several family members looked genuinely ashamed, while others appeared to be processing the implications of what they had witnessed over the past year. So, here is what is going to happen, I announced. I am done with the family dynamics that allowed this situation to develop. I am done being the family member whose success is seen as threatening rather than celebrated. And I am done investing my time and emotional energy in relationships with people who would rather see me fail than succeed. I turned to specific family members as I spoke. Robert David, I am grateful that we were able to build a genuine working relationship through the consulting projects, and I hope that continues. Grandmother, thank you for always asking thoughtful questions about everyone's lives. You are an example of what family support actually looks like. Then I addressed the group as a whole. For everyone else, I will be polite at family gatherings, but I will not be seeking deeper relationships with people who have demonstrated that they view my success as a threat to their own self-worth. The party ended shortly after my announcement, with various family members leaving an uncomfortable silence or attempting awkward small talk that no one's heart was really in. Victoria left without speaking to me again, and Maria approached to offer a tearful apology that I accepted but did not fully embrace. Over the following months, the family dynamics settled into new patterns. Some relationships deepened, particularly with family members who made genuine efforts to understand and celebrate my professional growth. Other relationships became cordially distant, which was honestly a relief. The consulting partnership with Jennifer continued to thrive, and Morrison Tech offered me a promotion to Vice President of Strategic Operations, partly based on the innovative small business strategies I had developed through the consulting work. I accepted the promotion, but negotiated a schedule that allowed me to continue the consulting practice, which had become too fulfilling to abandon. Most importantly, I built what I now think of as my chosen family, a network of professional colleagues, mentoring relationships, and genuine friendships with people who celebrate success rather than feeling threatened by it. Jennifer became not just a business partner, but a close friend and mentor who helped me understand my own professional value in ways my biological family never had. The best part of this entire story is not the professional success or the financial gains, though both have been significant. The best part is discovering that family loyalty should not require accepting condescension, that professional achievements are worth celebrating regardless of other people's insecurities, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop investing in relationships with people who consistently undervalue you. Have you ever had family members who seemed threatened by your success instead of celebrating it? What would you have done if you discovered that your own sister had sabotaged your career out of jealousy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives on family dynamics and professional boundaries. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life tales about navigating complicated family relationships and finding your professional path despite the obstacles. Share this video with anyone who might need the reminder that your success does not diminish anyone else's worth, and that real family supports your growth rather than sabotaging it. Thank you for listening to my journey from dismissed warehouse worker to successful entrepreneur. And remember that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and refusing to accept other people's limitations on your potential. Here is to building chosen families, celebrating genuine success, and never letting anyone convince you to play small just to make them feel better about themselves.